We're going to call the meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. Before we get started, I have to read an introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specifications manual. The Design Adjustment Committee does not consider housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based upon the facts presented. All variance requests require a 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of committee decisions are to Superior Court. The parties of these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion on the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with an affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in on the clipboard in the back of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and the standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I could have all staff, applicants, and any members of the public who wish to speak, please stand up and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Our first item of business is approval of the September 18th minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at those, and if so, any discussion or?
Mr. Chair, as I was not present for that meeting, I will be abstaining from voting on those minutes.
Understood. Any other comments about the minutes?
I have no comments, but I'd make a motion to approve.
I will second that motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right. First item up for business is the Circle K on Market Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is evidentiary hearing number 1, located at 4500 Market Street. The site includes 1.39 acres and is located within RB, Regional Business District. The site is currently vacant. The proposal is for a new convenience store with fuel pumps along Market Street. At the September 18th meeting, the applicant requested relief from the standard driveway offset from an intersection and relief from the standard driveway width. The request for relief from the standard driveway offset was granted to the applicant. The request for relief from the standard driveway width was continued. The applicant has revised the request for relief from the standard driveway width. At the September 18th meeting, the applicant proposed a right-in, right-out driveway along South Kerr Avenue with a width of 45 feet. The applicant is now proposing a right-in, right-out driveway along South Kerr Avenue with a width of 40 feet. The Technical Standards and Specifications Manual specifies minimum standards for driveway width. A 2-lane, 2-way driveway, which provides access to a commercial use, has a maximum driveway width of 30 feet, measured at the property line. The applicant has provided justification for the request on attachment 3 of your package. Just to reiterate to members of the committee and the public, this exhibit is what is currently being proposed by the applicant. This exhibit is what was previously proposed at the September 18th meeting. This concludes staff's presentation. I'd like my case summary to be entered in the record. I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well.
Any questions for staff? Thank you, Zach. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon, Amy Schaefer on behalf of the applicant. I want to say thank you all for continuing this to let us take a look at this. I'm not going to go through the presentation, except to say that after the meeting, the engineers went back through and ran some models. They did try to model the narrower driveway, and that just didn't work with the truck types that we need to enter and exit the site. Mr. Jacob Dooley from Timmons is here if you have any project-specific questions or how they did the modeling. But we were able to get the driveway down to 40 feet with the standard apron. And I think I said all of that correctly. So if you have any questions, as I said, Mr. Dooley's here and happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions?
Go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say, looking at the auto turns, it appears that there is some still unused width in that driveway. Is there a reason that it couldn't be reduced even further?
No, and honestly, these turns took several attempts. They're not the most comfortable turns going in there, and I know there's a factor of safety built into the program, but it really took, a good attempt for us to get the 40 to work, which I am confident does work, just not as comfortable as a 45, but I think 40 would help, reduce anyone running over curbs and just protecting that long term.
Do you think that, in looking at the auto turns, it almost looks like the pinch point might be in the flares as opposed to the width at the, I guess, at the narrowest point? Was that option looked at lengthening the flares to allow them?
That option was not specifically looked at. I know we used just the Wilmington typical section. I think expanding the flares, they could come in at a higher angle, but just having a turn movement with the option of having someone waiting there or nearby, I think the 40 would still be ideal for us for the project as a whole. But the tapers did not look to be increased.
Understood. And then the sidewalk that's out there, is that the alignment of the sidewalk as it exists today?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Were there, I did have one more. On the site plan, were there any considerations for painting out, since it's a right-in, right-out driveway, is there any way to delineate the center of that driveway so that it provides direction to egressing vehicles that they need to be as far, separating the traffic, treating it like 40 feet, that's wider than a 3-lane section of roadway. So and that's the concern here.
Sure.
You have such this expanse, but treating the pavement markings on the site to provide that direction to the public,
Right, now I think we're open to that. We're currently in design now, wanting to go through this process to, make sure we can get our trucks in and out first, and then, we'll go through all the appropriate submittals and work through all the reviews there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. I appreciate it. Before we get into further discussion on it, we have to open the public hearing. So I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, which leaves us to the discussion. I guess we don't have to readdress the first item. We're only addressing the width of the driveway. Any discussion? I know for me, the one thing, and this is a minor thing, it's probably more of a TRC thing, is the alignment of the sidewalk coming in at the flares. It probably needs to come in at the narrowest point and cross at the narrowest point. If we've got a wider driveway, we want to maximize or minimize that distance that pedestrians have to cross. So I feel like that's something that the TRC would address, but I'll probably add it as a condition just to be sure. That's one thing that noticed to me. I don't know, I'm a little sympathetic, especially on a major road like this. If we narrow it down, we're sort of forcing some of those trucks into other lanes to be able to make that turning movement. So I guess I appreciate the reduction from 45 to 40. Wish it could be more. Feel like it probably could be more, but Any thoughts?
No, I agree with you in the fact that my biggest concern, which we've already, as a part of the previous meeting, is worrying about a truck swinging into the adjoining lane to try to make that turn a little bit wider, and then that's going to create, eventually that's going to create a problem if we have to do it that way. That's just my 2 cents worth in on that.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Well, I'm going to make the motion to approve the 40-foot proposed width of driveway due to site constraints and auto turn analysis, with the added condition that the sidewalk must cross at the narrowest point. That's my motion.
Second.
Any other discussion on that item? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that variance passes. Thank you. Thank you. Brings us to our second item, 3990 Independence Boulevard. Is there a staff presentation?
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. As mentioned, this site is located at 3990 Independence Boulevard. Contains approximately 60.9 acres. It's currently zoned MD17, multi-dwelling residential, and IND general industry. There is a proposed rezoning for this parcel, which will be moving forward after this hearing. The proposed rezoning is for an MD17 conditional district rezoning. There are 3 adjustments being requested by the applicant. They are for relief from the minimum standards of a residential collector street, relief from the maximum length of a private driveway, and relief from the maximum length of a cul-de-sac street. Currently, as you see on the site plan, the site has direct road frontage along Independence Boulevard. The applicant is proposing to construct a residential development that will contain 580 units. This proposal includes 2 accesses off of Independence Boulevard with a residential collector street proposed to navigate through the site and toward the west and northwest property boundary shown on your screen there. The technical standards state that the length of private driveway shall not exceed 500 linear feet. The applicant's proposing maximum driveway lengths that exceed that standard, thus the need for an adjustment. The applicant is also requesting a waiver from the standard cross-section for a residential collector street. The applicant's proposing a non-standard cross-section, the specifics of which are outlined in your case summary. I've done my best to try and outline the different cross-sections that the applicant is proposing on your screen in front of you. And they are also requesting a waiver from the maximum length of a cul-de-sac street, which is limited to 500 feet. They are proposing a cul-de-sac street that exceeds that length and is approximately 1,945 feet. The findings for issuing a waiver from the technical standards are listed in your case summary. We would ask that along with this proposal, if you were to approve it, there's a preliminary plan associated with it, which would also need to be approved. I'd like my case summary to be entered into the record. Happy to answer any questions that you have, and the applicant's here as well with the presentation.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, I would like to note that I was present in a meeting where the rezoning application was overviewed after it was received. There was no discussion of the actual request for the DAC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name's Cindy Wolf. I'm here on behalf of New Hanover County, who currently owns the property, and Northwood Raven, who would be the potential developer. I appreciate Pat's summary. I won't. As he pointed out, it's a large tract of land, and we're interested in the rezoning for the purpose of multifamily development. Northwood Raven in general has larger communities. There is a combination of garden-style, attached townhome, and even detached townhome type of development in their rental communities. And they like to portray a more urban character in it. So the green on either side of the tract in general are all wetlands. None of the adjacent developments that have occurred on the northeast and southwest provided any type of stubs to our property for future extension. And then we have the Cameron Industrial Tract, which is the vacant at the northwest end. So part of our project and part of making all of the 500 rule and all of the other rules in the subdivision regulations meet was to incorporate a public street from Independence all the way back, and we're stubbing it. So with that, as Pat pointed out, we have a variety of different cross-sections, and a lot of this, I believe, is sort of timing. We're thrilled that the city is in the process of updating their technical standards, and what we have proposed along here with both the angled parking, the parallel parking, and the cross-sections in general meet what the draft of all of those criteria are for cross-sections. So I think had this just waited for TRC, we might not have needed any waivers in the first place, but because we're in the process of a rezoning, this was a necessary to ask for these waivers to keep within the process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions when we get to the end as far as the cross-sections, but they do match what is, we hope, the technical standards for the future. The other waivers, 4 to 8, all have to do with the 500-foot rule. We have the main street. Had we brought the street in and perhaps circled it through, I think the concept was it would have lost a bit of circulation character in among the design itself. And each of the waivers we are asking for, you can see on the right-hand side where it's blown up, have more than adequate duplicate and sometimes a third access point to all points that are beyond that 500 foot. So as far as emergency services vehicles, just general circulation, there are multiple directions to get to every one of those points that do exceed the 500. So everything in green meets all the criteria. It is the red dash lines that don't, and you can see what those distances are and all of the circulation patterns to access them. The last and final is the length of a cul-de-sac. It's stubbed to the property line, so generally speaking, it's not considered a cul-de-sac, but until it extends, obviously it will act as one. This shows where the 500 for a maximum length of cul-de-sac would occur and where we're occurring, but you can see that that future extension would go over to potentially Sunnyvale Drive. That would give it access to the Carolina Beach Road signal or down to River Road. And what will be provided if the project is phased, as we've proposed a possibility, the 2 driveways that are flanking the first phase would provide the city standard turnaround of T-head 60 across, 20, all 20-foot radii. And then the final phase, if that road were not extended over at that point, same thing. We have driveways that would provide the standard turnaround. So we certainly believe that the waivers requested still continue to meet the intent of the code, which ensures protection and safety of life and property in the community. It wouldn't increase congestion or compromise safety at this point because traffic will be limited to the ingress and egress of residents and guests of this particular neighborhood until someday the street's extended. When it is extended, something like the parking along it and the alternative cross-sections would provide traffic calming. The waivers would not be contrary to the public interest. or endanger public or overall safety because those proposed improvements, as I said, still meet emergency services criteria. And we believe that just in general, the reason we're rezoning is to provide for some of the comprehensive plan policies and guidelines for residential development. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
Cindy, can you go back to that slide?
Okay.
Thank you for reading my mind. So you mentioned that the green on either side was wetlands. I assume that's the dark green?
Yes, that's correct.
This looks to be a fairly large parcel with the wetlands off to the edges. In terms of the standards of approval, are there any topographic constraints, natural features, things that are driving this design other than it's consistent with what is being proposed for a change in the standards?
Yes, we certainly believe so, because connecting into Southgate, for example, not only are those wetlands, but it is a very defined drainage pattern along that boundary. Along the southern boundary, there is a drainage pattern and actual floodplain. It's the special flood hazard area on the southwest portion of the site. So we do believe that the topography in general makes a difference where the ponds had to be and how the site would lay out.
So in terms of the design of the residential collector street, though, are there specific things that are constraining you from being able to meet those standards in terms of the right-of-way width, the plaza width, or is that more of it?
Well, right now, the standard in general is no parking on the main road. And so I think that the parking provides not only the traffic calming measure, but the character of the street, and I guess the fact that the city is reviewing changes to the technical standards that would provide those types of things. The width of the street is what is basically being proposed. So we're not really, we're waiving some standards that are currently in place. But the centerline radii, the lengths of tangents, none of those things are being compromised.
And I will note that I think just looking at your right-of-way widths, it's only the section that's 48 that is substandard in right-of-way.
That's true, actually, yes.
Substandard in right-of-way width, and then there are a couple, and then two of them are substandard in the pavement width, and you are providing sidewalks on both sides. One question, I don't know if this is something that you can answer or if this is more for staff, is in terms of the reduction in the plaza size, are there corresponding standards in terms of street trees and planting to make sure that we're not compacting the soil to the point where those trees have an issue when we do something narrower?
The current standard or the proposed standard?
The
Well-
proposed standard, I'm pretty sure, has the same median. It's not the center median because we don't have a center median currently in any of our standards. But I believe the median from back of curb over to the sidewalk is consistent with the current. It's really the pavement widths that are changing with the new standards.
That's correct. It's the proposed technical standards have a 6-foot plaza width for all types of streets, for all right-of-way widths, and the landscape chapter has not been released for public comment yet, so we can certainly consider incorporating those elements into the proposed technical standards. But, I mean, I had a similar concern was, you know, there is a benefit to providing a wider plaza that's consistent with this type of street. And, you know, I understand the need for the waiver for the additional parking, the reverse angle. I totally understand that, and even the parallel parking. But not in those areas, I don't know that I can see the site constraint. I will say this. This is a very good exhibit, by the way. I don't know who did it, but the exhibit that shows the lengths and all of that, that was very clear. I appreciate
That's
that.
hats, and I appreciated it. I grabbed it.
Yeah, it's,
Well, and I guess I approached it that way rather than just saying, well, let's put a 70-foot wide right-of-way all the way. Then we wouldn't have been asking for waivers for the right-of-way width, but it made sense to go with what potentially will be approved as the new technical standards. But you can see, as far as the design itself, if necessary during the TRC process, that medians, if the landscape comes out differently, we have the ability to widen it.
Sure.
Is it correct to say that it's only in that reverse angle parking area where the plazas are being reduced from 6 to 2.5? I think maybe
Yeah, I guess so, but that
previous-
is the technical standard
For the
that I was
color
going
coding.
by. So yes, that is the case, if that median. My understanding of the reverse parking, though, is when it is done, there are more criteria for
Bump outs.
the other bump outs, yes.
Yeah, the bump outs
For
is
the
where the
purpose of the trees. So
Yeah.
rather than street trees as we know them, linear along the right-of-way, I think it's more like a parking lot median-style tree to meet the same criteria.
And I can appreciate the traffic calming aspect of all of that too, so. Any other questions for the applicant? Cindy, I think we'll probably be calling you again, but I do have to get the public hearing open.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. This time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
Good afternoon, y'all. I'm fine to be here. I'm not worried about the way it lays out or anything. But the one major thing, my name is Malcolm Farr. It's MALCOLMPHARR. And I live at 465 Hollins Road in Southgate. And I'm not sure quite where it's at on this map. Cindy, did you know? It's in,
This is Hollins Road at the cul-de-sac.
okay, I live right here, okay. I live in this little turn, I don't know if, it's kind of across from the first, this turn right here in Southgate, that you see a house that looks like it's got a real white roof on it. That's mine, it's a metal roof. Okay, there's a swampy area back in there. And then you go down to the cul-de-sac, and there's more swampy area back in there too. And what I'm saying is, I just want to make sure that there's water in there too. And with all this rain we've had lately, and the water has been kind of standing back there in that little swampy area. So I want to make sure that with all this development that we don't get drowned. So I don't know if they're planning on trying to clean some of these ditches and things out. The city, I called the engineer department and kind of reported it, that there's actually a main sewage line that runs down there. Matter of fact, there's two almost on my property. There's one at the very point, and then there's another one a little bit further down at the end of my property. And there's a major sewage line that runs through there that goes down to the sewage plant. But this is a little swampy area, and it seems like lately the water has been standing there more than it used to, because there's a little creek back in there. And a long time ago, when we had some hurricanes and some real bad storms, I could hear that stream rushing from my screen porch. That's how close it is to me. And I've walked back there before and looked around, but I have not heard it lately. I don't think there's any beavers back there. I don't think it's dammed up. I think it's just stopped up from all the trees that are down in there, because some of them have died in that water, and they fell and so forth. But I just want to make sure that there's some ponds or something, more retention ponds or drainage, because that land is already wet in there. It stays wet, just about. Even as dry as it has been all summer long, it was still water in there, because that little creek It used to run one way, but it run in a different way now. It's running a different way. Since they built the Harris Teeter over there in on the other side of us, there used to be a real big deep ditch right in that very corner. The pipes and things they put in there were like 6 foot, 7 foot deep, high. And they filled that up where the city barbecue place is at. That used to be always, it was real deep and there was usually water always in there. But that's my main concern. I'm not upset with the planning because if something like this doesn't go in there, there'll be something else that goes in there. Plus this other little part over here, if you see my house, this other little part over here, if you go down, is also going to be developed by a different company. I've already been to one meeting about that. So see, with these two developments, I just want to make sure that Southgate does not flood.
Understood.
That's my main concern.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions? And I've been there. I've been in that house about 22 years. And there's always been water over there, even in the summertime when it's real dry.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this item? No? All right. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. I guess just one clarification from that, Pat. The project that he was referring to the, I guess, plan right, I don't know whether it's north, that project is called?
Midtown Junction.
Midtown Junction, right. And that's currently in the TRC process?
That's correct.
And did the Midtown Junction project provide any stub connection for this to connect to?
No,
Okay.
it did not.
Yeah. And I guess the reason there was because of the same wetlands that the gentleman was referring to and Cindy.
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we have 3 waivers to consider. One of them is the sort of cumulative non-standard elements of all 3 sections, and then we have the maximum length of the driveways and maximum length of the cul-de-sac. I guess first we'll just take them in order. Any comments? Yeah, I closed the public hearing. Appreciate that. But we'll just take those in order, and any discussion on the non-standard right-of-way elements?
From a planning perspective, I like the idea of narrowing the pavement width. It does help to slow traffic down. It does help with placemaking. It's something that I think, given the wetlands and the streams out here, reducing impervious surface in the upland areas, it could be beneficial. I think the one question I have is that we have draft technical standards, but there are other pieces that are, everything goes together. And so if we're reducing, I don't know what else is in there that we should be saying, if we're reducing these widths, then here are the other things that go with that in terms of, I think Cindy mentioned the islands in the area of the reverse angle parking, that instead of having street trees along the sidewalk, you would place those trees into islands instead.
Yeah, and those bump outs.
Bump outs,
Yeah.
and so that's where I guess, I don't know if there's a way to condition this on standards that don't yet exist,
That's a great point.
and how we do that.
Yeah, I know that my thoughts were looking at this. I see your point about those. There looks like there's, I don't know what, 6 or 8 bump outs in the reverse angle section. Perhaps there's a condition that can be added, since it's not super clear in the details, that a street tree be added to each of those bump out areas. I mean, I believe that would be the intent anyway, but if that's not clear, I'm sure that's a condition we can add. I wondered if there would be a need to widen the plaza area in those areas. I feel like that's a fair trade, for reducing the asphalt width. That's just a thought. But, considering there really isn't a site constraint per se in reducing the right-of-way width below standards, I can appreciate the elements that are presented, like you said, but I don't know. Any other thoughts? How about from a utility standpoint? Is there a need for, we got the 10-foot non-municipal. Is that as an additional plaza width or reduction from 8 to 6? Is that a concern from a utility standpoint?
It's all going to depend on the depth of the utilities, and we can work that out in TRC.
Understood.
I think we mentioned it's just in that red stretch. Well, I guess.
There are non-standard elements throughout.
Right.
Throughout the length of the road. I guess the biggest deviation from the technical standards is in that red stretch. I like the reverse angle option. I think that, we need to support that option. Not too many examples of it. This seems like a pretty good example. They're doing it right with the median in the middle. That'll help prevent misuse, which would be really bad in this spot, pulling in head first the other way. So I think the median is important. They're proposing that. So I really don't have a problem with most of it.
I like the reduced pavement widths. I like the on-street parking. I think those are elements that we need to be working towards. I guess one question on the trees, since we don't have those revised tech standards yet, is could we have a condition that basically says they need to provide, and the term is going to escape me right now, but essentially kind of subsurface treatments to make sure that the trees can survive based on the recommendation of the city's arborist.
The required soil volume for a street tree that's 600 cubic feet. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not familiar with that standard.
I don't know the details, but can we condition it saying like they need to get city arborist approval for soil volumes and ensuring that they're not compacted with the reduced standards?
Cindy, can you come up for a second? Sorry, you get your steps in here. Was there any discussion in the pre-TRC meeting about the size of those bump out islands? And was there any discussion as it relates to street trees and soil volumes and things like that?
There had not been. The developer specifically seems to, they're fine with more medians than probably are required in general parking areas themselves. So I think in the design, probably like every 6 or 7 spaces, put another one. But if those need to be, one of the changes that came about over the past couple of years with internal parking medians, similar to what we're creating here, was that soil volume area. And so if that needs to be a criteria that these, instead of having 4, there are 2 that are double-sized, then yes, I don't see any problem with that.
How big are they now? Do you know how wide they are?
I would have made them at least 14 feet, because that's my typical. These days in parking lots, they almost have to be 18 to meet a calculation. But in this particular case, you also sort of have the additional parallel median. So I didn't know that there was a calculation specifically, but I think that we can meet that same criteria.
Okay,
Of a parking lot tree median, this would meet that same criteria.
Yeah, since we don't really have a landscape standard yet that deals with this type of arrangement in the current tech standards, we do have those parking lot median landscaping, and I think if they're that size, that should provide adequate volume for a street tree. So perhaps that could be how we frame the condition. And it looks like to me that they meet it now. We just want to make sure that that's, you know, what wouldn't want to do is to approve this arrangement, and then you just can't get a viable tree to
Yeah,
work
actually,
in.
I made them 18 feet, now that I see it.
Is that 18 feet long?
That's right, between the two parallel side, you know, parking space here, parking space here.
Got it.
The perpendicular to that would be 18, the same as I do parking lots.
Okay,
So I was consistent in that,
okay,
so it would meet the same criteria if that's where the calculation came from.
okay. Any other discussion on these items? Thank you, Cindy. Where do we stand on the median width of 6? Are we okay with 6 feet? Or is there a need for, or excuse me, the plaza width, excuse me, instead of 6, instead of the required 8 feet for this type of road, it is going to 6. And I can confirm that the technical standards, the proposed technical standards, and they're just draft, they're in public comment now, they're not final, they've not been approved, but they are proposed at 6 across the board.
And was that 6-foot dimension, was that discussed with our arborist?
They have had a review of it. I don't know that we specifically, you know, like I said, the landscape chapter hasn't been released for public comment. So if there's a conflict there, then we would have to deal with it. But I mean, the current technical standards range from 5 to 8. So 6 is kind of in the middle of that. Yeah. I'm going to make a motion that we approve this waiver. And just, I'm going to let you add the condition, if you don't mind. I'm going to approve it as shown. I appreciate the traffic calming aspects of it, so that would be my justification. There's not really a site constraint, but I can appreciate the on-street parking and the traffic calming aspects of the proposed design, and the consistency with the proposed draft standards.
And that would be subject to the condition that the bump outs in the areas with the reverse angle parking meet the size and soil volume requirements that we would typically require for an island in a parking lot.
I accept that condition. So is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion on item number 1? All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That variance passes. That brings us to adjustment number 2, which is the maximum length of the driveways. And Pat, can you bring up that exhibit that shows the driveway lengths? Thank you. So this is our exhibit and the degrees of, I guess, nonconformity with the standard. I do like the circulation, and I will even go a step further as to say that, you know, if you enter at the very, very end of the driveway, you can work your way back out to either of the 2 entrances. So the internal circulation, I think, is good. The one that I have maybe the most trouble with is the one that's compliant with this standard, which is that top right, actually on the left side, top right. You know, how there's some kind of dead-end stubs there that may be able to be looped back, but I feel like that's more of a topic for discussion in adjustment number 3, which is the maximum length of the cul-de-sac. As far as this one, does anybody have any comments on the maximum length of a driveway? No discussion? Okay, like I said, I will make the motion to approve adjustment number 2, the maximum length of a driveway, due to site constraints, which wetlands were identified, and good internal circulation.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Variance number 2 is approved. And then the last one, the maximum length of a cul-de-sac. This is pretty substantial. Maximum length is 500. Proposed length is 1,945. There's obviously site constraints with the wetlands and lack of connectivity on the adjoining properties. There's going to be a temporary turnaround at the end. Sorry, again.
Yes, I mean, we would have to put some type of turnaround. If it were phased, which is the lower right-hand, then that are driveways there at a potential phase line. So the turnaround is there by nature of just all the other improvements. And the same thing, if the second phase, or the final phase was done and the road had not extended, then again, the driveways provide a standard turnaround.
Okay, so if they do the phase line, maybe they could at least put the driveway in on the right side, since it looks like that extends.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It would either be a hammerhead where you'd go an additional 30 feet forward and do it
Yep,
that way.
yep.
Or the T, whichever
Okay,
way.
well, yeah,
But
and that could be
since
decided by
we're creating that
TRC.
intersection, this makes all the sense in the world.
Okay. And have you explored any, I mean, obviously, there's wetland constraints that, I think it was Mr. Farr, sorry, I believe I was your name, spoke of, but has there been any, have you explored any connection with Hollins?
Yes, we did initially because the fire code initially had said you couldn't have more than 30 non-sprinklered units with a single road that didn't have enough diagonal distance between them. So our initial, what we sent to the neighborhood up at Southgate originally, had a emergency-only type access from Hollins over. Apparently, there has been some change in the fire code, and now it's 60 units, which suits us fine. It didn't have any impact on our plan the way we had it. The people in Southgate obviously did not want any type of
They didn't want any connection.
But that being said, it would have only been for emergency reasons. But because of impacts on the wetlands, it would have required an easement over city land. So a lot of reasons, it didn't make a lot of sense. That being said, you made the comment about the one pod of 6 singles and I believe 12 duplicates that is a dead end. I've made sure that where that is situated, again, there are turnarounds within 150 feet of the end or of the beginning, just by nature of the driveways themselves. But the other reason for that is that space between the 6 face-to-face units and the other 5 that are to the south of it are some significant trees. So we're creating a grove there, and that'll be all part of the TRC review of the tree removal and everything. But they don't show on my exhibit, obviously.
No, I think there was an exhibit included
Actually,
somewhere.
It
Yeah, in the
might
staff
actually
report.
be, Pat's would be the best thing where to show it. I don't have the plan in my set. I just have the color exhibits.
Okay.
I think it was your first page, or your second page, Pat? So that was a constraint type of thing, is the
Okay.
reason we have it set up that way is because of a nice grove of trees that we're protecting right in that area.
Oh, yeah,
There
okay.
you go.
Yep, those there, that one and the one next to it. And both of those are to remain, I'm assuming.
That whole glade, or whatever is in that glade, the ones that are circled are obviously the more significant ones. But we want to create a green space in there. And there's also, you can see some topography.
Yeah.
There's a small ditch that runs right through there. So we want to keep it as natural as possible between those units.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Cindy, do you know if any other treatment for the end of this roadway was considered, other than
I'd be open
temporary
to-
hammerhead?
Yeah, I'd be open to whatever, but I guess as far as putting any type of a bulb on it, I would have guessed we would have done the hammerhead no matter what. The driveways provide for that. If the my guess is, if this ever does extend through, if it becomes industrial development on the Cameron property, I would hope that the city would probably prevent industrial-type trucks from using this residential collector street. If it ends up being a rezoning, then we have the opportunity during the rezoning to perhaps, a roundabout or a similar treatment with internal park or street side parking. So who knows what's going to happen in the future, but I think that there's good options.
And you went exactly down the path I was hoping you would. Like, if those three roadways or that intersection of those two driveways in the roadway were instead a roundabout now, so that if any future, the way when you look at the overall map, it looks like there would be two major traffic calming situations on this road from Sunnyvale to Independence. The reverse angle parking with the center median would be traffic calming, and then there would be a roundabout another third of the way through. So there would be two significant traffic calming elements if the terminus of this road were more of a roundabout rather than once it were extended, a straight shot through.
But could it be something more like what they've got on Tanbridge and back on Wells, where they're mountable, not the really large roundabout? Because you don't really have a lot of, if this were a roundabout, you've got a driveway with basically 3 units on one side and roughly, 7 units on the other side. So I would hope that they wouldn't be required to have a full-size city standard roundabout, but would the mountable curbing serve that same purpose?
It could. I'm just thinking out loud, what if some of that area were dedicated for one half of a future roundabout or something, just trying to plan for that property line looks like either on the industrial side or at those driveways would be the most ideal location for this treatment. But anyway, I was mainly curious to know if...
I see where you're going. I
Yeah.
would hope that the Cameron design would be a little more so. If it stays industrial, there would be a buffer yard there. If it's not industrial, then there's a lot of opportunity.
Okay.
Is there any concern? So, I'm assuming right now, as it's proposed, those two driveway entrances are the hammerhead. Is that right?
Whoops.
At the very end?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's my concern, right? Using a driveway, then backing out of a driveway, that's not in the
Well,
forward
but they would,
direction. Yeah.
all of these are still emergency vehicle compliant. I'm just saying, if somebody comes up there and they're not supposed to be there because they're not part of the community and there's no reason for the public really to be at this point, at this time, then if it's an emergency vehicle, they can take a right and come right around to the other side, or they can
Circulate,
take a
yeah.
left and come around. So I feel like our circulation is adequate, that it meets all the criteria without going above and beyond with things that we're not sure would avail to whatever design in the future.
Yeah.
I just, through my blue hatching, showed that just the way it would be built meets the emergency turnaround standard.
Okay. And the right-of-way obviously extends to the property line, so there would be nothing preventing a connection should that connection be appropriate.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? I think that's the last time, Cindy. Thank you. Well, they definitely have a site constraint with the lack of connectivity. I know looking at it, I wondered if that emergency services connection was appropriate here. But I don't know. Like I said, you can get at both entrances back to Independence in a host of ways through internal circulation, and that, she was correct about fire code, right?
Yeah, first of all, with you've already made it for the driveway variance, but you still have a lot of interconnectivity in between, so we're not dead-ended somewhere in the event that we have an operation there. Plus, the hammerhead turnarounds are being provided because once a drive exceeds 150 feet, there has to be a way for apparatus to turn around. And that's being provided with these hammerhead turns at these intersections so that we don't exceed 150 feet. So we have interconnectivity to be able to gain access to all of the buildings that are indicated on the proposal.
Okay, and y'all are okay if those hammerheads are in the form of like concrete driveways, as opposed to the standard asphalt hammerhead?
Yeah, because it's going to obviously have to, of course, support the weight of fire equipment.
Yep.
So as long as it meets those for the requirement for the load-bearing capabilities of it, then that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this one? Have a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the third waiver requested to exceed the length of a cul-de-sac street. By justification is they're providing appropriate U-turn movements, and the interconnectivity of the entire site would reduce the need to perform a three-point U-turn.
Okay, I will second. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of this item, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, do we need to make a motion on the preliminary plan as well?
Do we? Oh,
So
thank you.
I move approval of the proposed preliminary plan subject to the conditions recommended by staff in the case summary.
I will second that. Any other discussion on the preliminary plan? All in favor of approval of the preliminary plan with staff recommended conditions, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you for that. Our third item, 3803 Peachtree.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is evidentiary hearing number 3, located at 3803 Peachtree Avenue. The site includes 0.99 acres and is located within MD17, high-density, multiple-dwelling residential district. The site currently contains a medical office and a single-family dwelling. The proposal for this site includes a 34-unit multi-dwelling residential development known as Midtown Flats. The requested adjustment for this project is for a payment in lieu for required open space. Section 18-28 of the Land Development Code requires a minimum open space equal to 20% of the total lot area. Section 18-507 of the Land Development Code stipulates that the Design Adjustment Committee may allow payment to the city in lieu of dedication of open space, set aside, or a combination of dedication and payment. The required open space for the proposed project is 8,610 square feet. The applicant is proposing 6,350 square feet of open space. The applicant requests a payment in lieu for 2,260 square feet of open space. The tax value of the entire tract is $340,400 per the New Hanover County tax records. Based on the tax value of the property, the price per square foot is $7.89. The applicant is requesting to pay $17,831.40 for the 2,260 square feet of required open space. The applicant has provided justification for the request on attachment 3 of your package. This concludes staff's presentation. I'd like my case summary to be entered into the record. I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I don't have any questions. I do need to disclose that I was part of an email chain with other city staff where a question was raised as to if this were approved, if the funds could be dedicated to improvements at MP Park. So,
Okay, thank you. I know I had a question as well, reading through the section of code that was referenced in the staff report about where these funds were to be used, and the Design Adjustment Committee's name is littered throughout that section of code, so I may need some additional direction myself on what our role is. But does applicant wish to make a presentation?
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Resnick with CSD Engineering. Have the owner with us this afternoon as well to answer any questions, which I'm not capable of answering. Just wanted to explain to the committee why we're requesting this payment in lieu. It's a very challenging site. There were a lot of constraints on the site. Mostly it was the desire to save the trees that are on the site and not being able to push the parking in other areas. There were some sort of hidden fine print in the code which prevented us from using some space, excuse me, to be counted as open space, such as a minimum width of, I believe, 10 feet for the open space stretches. And so we weren't able to use some places that we originally thought we could use for open space. Again, very tightly constrained site. We are adjacent to Cross City Trail, so we do have some access to open space, not on the site, not provided by the site, but it is in close proximity. I'm here to answer any other questions that committee may have, and thank you for hearing the case.
Sure. Howard, that area that's, I guess, planned north-ish, I guess, is that currently provided open space? What is that there?
Yes, a portion of that. Again, we are forbid to, or not allowed to include some of that area as open space. I believe the area within the buffer or the setback. But yes, that is open space. It's just not enough.
Okay. And do we have the ability to bring up like an aerial of where this site is? Yeah, thank you. And the Cross City Trail is to the north side of Park, is that right?
That's correct, north side of Park Avenue.
Okay. Yeah, and not a lot of justification in the code as to the criteria that we, I guess the code says that may be approved when conditions exist such that, where is it? Yeah, maybe you can help me out, Linda.
yeah. So
Thank you.
the Design Adjustment Committee shall be authorized to permit minor deviations from these standards whenever it determines that the objectives underlying these standards can be met without strict adherence, or that because of the peculiarities of a tract or the facilities proposed would be unreasonable to require strict adherence to the standards. And so that's under flexibility of administration.
And under 507, I guess, when conditions exist such that providing the entire amount of open space set aside is not reasonable and the recreational needs of the development can be adequately met. And I guess you're saying that they can be adequately met because of proximity to the other commercial areas and the Cross City Trail and...
That's correct. So it was kind of a really narrow tract, which tightly constrained, difficult to fit the minimums that you need to for building and parking, and we did our best to fit the open space on site as best as we can. Again, there were some other constraints associated with building code and use of certain areas as open space, and so instead we're asking for a payment in lieu, and the justification is that, hey, we're trying to save some trees in one area, which kind of made it very difficult to shift parking to other areas and not provide the some open space, and then we do have open space adjacent, not on the site, and there is close proximity to the site.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Quick question, Howard. What would the impact to the structure that you propose, what would that be to meet the open space requirement?
What width would we need to make?
What would you, I mean, what would be built if you had to adhere to it? What would be built?
I believe the minimum open space width was 10 foot, or is 10 foot. And again, we pushed the building within 5 foot. So basically that strip along the back side of the building couldn't be used. And Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but the strip along on the northeast side couldn't be used as well. That's a little 5-foot strip. And then there are strips throughout. Again, there were minimum width requirements. I believe it was 10 foot to be counted as open space. It would have severely shrunk the size of the building, basically, to be able to, in its current location. Again, you know, the layout of the site, you know, how we sited the building, and our options were limited just due to the size and shape of the tract.
And I guess my question is, there's 34 units, right? How many units would it go down to if you were to adhere to?
That is a very dynamic condition that I just couldn't answer that question.
How many ground square feet are we looking at right here?
Yeah, I don't have that answer either.
Okay.
That, again, that's like a jigsaw puzzle in using design software that, you know, it's kind of trial and error until you get to that point, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's,
You're 5.2% short. That's what it
Yeah,
looks
we
like.
got close. We pushed and shoved as much as we could, and we got really close. And again, it's kind of a balance of parking and building size, and then the landscaping requirements, and on, yeah.
I will note that just doing some quick measurements, MP Park is a little over a third of a mile away. So there's a full city park in close proximity.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assume this is like the other ones where we will have to have a public hearing. So I will open the public hearing. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Any other discussion before we take action on this item?
I think the only thing I was getting at is if they removed a portion of the building, there'd be fewer units.
Right.
If they removed units from the building, there would be fewer parking. So as
And
you
easier to meet
reduce
open space
units,
requirements.
you know, yeah, that's all I was trying to get to, but.
Now, I didn't look. Are they providing, maybe it's in here, Pat, I'm trying to get at required and provided parking. Sorry, I should have looked into this before the meeting. I just thought of it just now. Is that information provided in the packet? That would be Zach or whoever.
Sorry, I don't see it provided in the packet. If you give me a moment, I can take a look at the development plans.
Howard, do you have an answer to that question? What I'm trying to get at is the project providing?
I believe we're only providing the parking necessary for the building. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure that we only provided what was necessary to meet the city ordinance. And recently, the city has pulled back on their parking requirements, and instead of requiring a minimum, I think that it's a maximum of parking that you can have. That the city's code is now geared towards pushing the parking toward the minimum size.
Okay.
Amount of parking.
Yeah, and I guess Pat or Zach, whichever is able, is that, or maybe Linda, you know, is there a required number of spaces on this project? Or is it only the maximum?
I think it's the maximum, and then there is a required parking practical for the building to function.
your number, or is that a code number?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's how much you feel like you need to be able to provide to serve this many
Correct.
units.
Correct,
Understood.
and then, back to the building size, there's a building size that's functional that makes the project viable,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can see Pat and Zach both looking for the parking, and I'm going to add another question for them. Is this a project that is receiving a density bonus?
They are receiving a density bonus, yes, for providing affordable housing. There is a parking minimum for this project. Those are based off the types of units and number of bedrooms, and there is a maximum as well.
But we don't know where they lie as far as numbers go, as far as where do they sit in relation to that minimum. Because it is tough, it is a tough ask to say, you have to justify the need for the payment in lieu, and, if you're maximizing out number of units and you're providing additional parking or whatever, it makes it a harder decision to allow that. But I can certainly appreciate the proximity to parks and trails and the infill nature of the project, but just, got to check all those boxes.
Sure. When you look at the type of parking we're providing in front of the building, I think it clues you into the fact that we were just struggling to even get the minimum parking required. That's parallel parking right in front of the building. That angled parking isn't your typical angled parking that you would provide. So we were pushing and shoving to get what was needed to serve that building.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I will add, I have found the parking calculations. They are at the minimum of 46 spaces.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to make you run that gauntlet, but I think it was relevant.
So, Howard, you mentioned that isn't the typical angled parking. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, are there concerns about that?
I should have been more clear about that. It wouldn't be the typical angled parking that I would recommend. It is one of the approved angled parking spaces per city code.
Okay.
But it's a very, it's a steep
angle.
Depending on what you look at, which way you look at it, it's a steep angle or it's a, shallow angle. It's typically I would go 60 degree or, parking, and that's not 60 degree.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if it meant extra narrow or to squeeze it in there.
All right, so we've already had the public hearing, I think. So we're down to discussion and, a potential motion on this item. Anything else? Any other discussion?
I mean, when you look at it just from face value of not providing the green space, the first thing is, well, where are people that live here going to get exercise? It's in the vicinity of the Cross City Trail and connectivity to everything along that. So, and its location to MP Park. That's the part I have the least concern of. So I guess that's what we're voting on. Is it too much for right here is the concern, It's been said multiple times that we're squeezing it in. We're barely making a minimum. It's got to be functional.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that section 18507D1, conditions exist such that providing the entire amount of required open space set aside is not reasonable and the recreational needs of the development can be adequately met. I feel like I'm comfortable with that part of it, with that part of it. And I think that, they're providing the minimum parking, I think that speaks to is it reasonable? I don't know. That's a tough word, reasonable. But I guess that's what we're here for, so. I'm going to make a motion that we approve it, that we approve the request for payment in lieu of open space. I will add the recommended conditions. There is a proposed fee of $17,831.40, with an added condition that staff may require additional payment in lieu or reduction at the rate of $7.89 per square foot if there is any change to the proposed plan as it goes through TRC. I would say the justification for that request, or the motion, whatever the motion, is site constraints, tree save, and proximity to recreational facilities.
Mr. Chair, would you accept a friendly additional condition?
Sure, maybe.
I was just reviewing, section D3 says that payment collected in lieu of dedicated open space set aside shall be used for acquisition or development of recreation areas serving the development as determined by the Design Adjustment Committee. So I would suggest that we add a condition that the payment in lieu shall be used for improvements to MP Park or the Cross City Trail.
I'll accept that condition. Any other discussion on that item? Is that a second? I don't know, sorry, that was a condition that's been added. I don't think we've gotten a second yet.
Would that condition also include connections to the Cross City Trail? Because we're across the street from the Cross City Trail.
We can take the Cross City Trail out and just leave it at MP Park. I was just trying to list recreation facilities in the area.
No, I think that connectivity to the trail is an important element
Okay.
of it. And I wouldn't want to be overly limiting to just MP Park, so,
So including connectivity to the trail.
yeah,
I'll second that.
okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of that item with the added condition, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The last item is number 4, Fales Landing.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This project, which is a subdivision known as Fales Landing, is located off of Masonboro Sound Road, 8055 Masonboro Sound Road. It contains currently 10.09 acres. It is zoned R15, and they are requesting relief from the minimum standards for a minor street. This project is a subdivision that has currently been reviewed and approved from city staff, technical review committee. It has direct frontage along Masonboro Sound Road, also Cabbage Inlet and Oyster Bay Lanes. And then there is an unimproved portion that is adjacent to Seabreeze Boulevard and Benton Avenue, which is shown in green on the screen in front of you. Seabreeze Boulevard is a city-maintained variable width gravel road off of Masonboro Sound Road, which ranges in size from 31 to 40 feet wide in right-of-way width. This road is unimproved for the entire length, going back all the way to Masonboro Sound Road. It terminates essentially at the Intercoastal Waterway as part of Benton Avenue. The Land Development Code, Section 18-495B, states that when a lot or lots within a subdivision abut an existing public street, highway, or thoroughfare, the developer shall be responsible for the installation and improvement of the portion of right-of-way adjacent to the subdivision or development. Right-of-way improvements shall be to the standards outlined in the Technical Standards and Specifications Manual. Therefore, the portion of Seabreeze Boulevard that's adjacent to this site is required to be improved to city standards based on that code section referenced above. I will note there is no connection proposed to that portion of Seabreeze Boulevard. The connections are shown in the site plan, kind of that lighter highlighted green that you see to the south. The applicant is proposing the construction of a minor street with a non-standard cross-section, which includes grading, ABC stone, and some stormwater infrastructure. Those improvements are outlined in your case summary. A waiver is required from the technical standards. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'd like my case summary be entered into the record, and the applicant is here as well with the presentation.
Pat, what is the length of right-of-way that they are adjacent to? Is that in the staff report? I'm sure it's here somewhere.
I can try and track that down for you briefly. I don't have that off the top of my head, but
Okay.
happy to do a quick measurement.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for staff?
I did want to add that I have some photos that were taken out on the site as well, just to give you an idea of the current state of Seabreeze.
I appreciate that. I've got some photos but they're back from June, so this is recent?
Within the last month and a half.
Okay. Okay. And that's basically the condition of it all the way out to Masonboro Sound Road?
Yeah, and the photo that you see on the left, that's going back out toward Masonboro Sound. I'd say that's probably more similar to the current condition. The photo on the right is going out toward the Intercoastal Waterway.
Okay, and this project, well, I guess after they subdivide lots 6 and 7, I mean, they would have legal access to that road to Seabreeze. I mean, other than that, I mean, you're not going to get a lot of extra traffic generated by this project. They would be coming and going through Cabbage Inlet, right?
Correct, yeah, the access.
But they would have the ability to add a driveway. I mean, there's some topo there, there's some site constraints there, but if they wanted to overcome those, they would have the ability to have access to Seabreeze.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Is it access to both Seabreeze and Benton Avenue?
Yeah, there is a point where it does
Oh, yeah, good point.
terminate right as it enters into Lot 7, where the city accepted it, and then it becomes Benton Avenue, right where that green portion ends on Lot 7.
So the city acceptance ends at the green, back in that other exhibit, back at the green point. That's,
Yeah, right.
okay. At that point, it's just right away, like it platted right away, but not improved in any way. Okay. But not city accepted. Okay. And the exhibit shows, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, the request indicates that they are proposing gravel, but their drawing shows in green as proposed asphalt.
That was what was approved to allow the subdivision to be approved through TRC. So they are coming back in with a request to essentially edit this portion for this to be gravel instead of the required asphalt paving.
Okay. If approved.
If approved,
Right.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And then also the other waivers that are requested in terms of width and sidewalks.
Correct, yes.
So they showed a full cross-section to get their approval.
Correct.
Okay, so it's just the one waiver with many parts. Okay, thank you. I didn't.
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to present?
Thank you. Amy Schaefer, I'm here on behalf of the property owner applicant. I have with me the property owner as well as our engineers from Hanover Design if you have any technical questions. Just real quick, that is a 400-foot area that we're asking not to pave. And I do have a presentation quickly. So this area, I'm not sure how much of this area that you all are familiar with. Mason Borough, as city staff said, and by the way, thank you so much to them. They came out and met with us on site. They've been working with us through the whole TRC process. We've filed an application to close the right-of-way, and we've been working on trying how to figure out what to do with Seabreeze during the whole TRC process. And just want to thank staff, the city attorney's office and planning staff, for helping us and working through this and coming out to see the property. Mason Borough is paved, Seabreeze is not. Benton Avenue is grass, and you can't get there unless you go through bushes and some spider webs. So just kind of briefly, this is the area. It does say Seabreeze the whole entire way, but pretty much from the driveway cross-section that you can see kind of by the pool, if you look to the top of the page, that driveway, all the way down to the water is Benton Avenue. Yeah, pretty much that space, all the way down. And again, you can kind of see this here a little bit better. Just some pictures staff already kind of showed you. This is current conditions. There's also a major ditch there along Seabreeze near the pump station. Pretty much CFPUA trucks are the only ones that come down there unless you live on the road.
That's the pump station on the left there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm just trying to orient myself.
Yep. So this is looking back up toward Mason Borough.
Got it.
Again, the proposed plan and where we would ask not to pave. Access is not through. We actually have an agreement with Oyster Bay, Ms. Painter, that we cannot access Seabreeze. That's going to be in our covenants and restrictions. So there will not be access for lots 6 and 7 to Benton or Seabreeze. That's part of what we're working on with Oyster Bay for the access through their roads. They didn't want that interconnectivity. And with the ditch there and the drainage out there, it just wasn't something that we wanted for our neighborhood either. So again, we're simply asking not to pave that. There are no sidewalks. There's no connection, nothing to connect to. I don't really think there's any plans for the city to make those connections. There's no real plans for the people on Seabreeze to redevelop their lots. So basically, it would be a connection to nowhere, from nowhere. And so the topography of the site, this is a low-lying area. The drainage is almost directly into the intercoastal waterway, and also the design wouldn't align with current built roads and the natural features of the area, which are all three things that the Design Adjustment Committee is supposed to consider when reviewing requests for a variance or waiver. If you have any particular questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
I have a question. Is there a picture that shows, or a cross-section that shows the proximity of the ditch adjacent to the drive? Is that the ditch on the left there?
That is the ditch on the left, yes. So there's a small grassy area, and then a major ditch, and then the pump station. And that ditch runs the majority of, all the way up Seabreeze to where the end of pavement would be.
So that ditch runs basically along the northern property line of the entire project?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it outfalls to the waterway, I assume? Okay.
I'm a little unfamiliar with this area. Is that asphalt in the foreground?
If it is, it's not maintained in any way, shape, or form. That's the driveway. That's the driveway to the home.
Okay.
On the other side.
Yeah, there's a few patches of asphalt in the right-of-way, but it's not consistent from what I remember.
Correct. As you can see, most of it is the dirt, and then if
Oh,
there...
there's the ditch.
Yeah, and you can see the ditch does come all the way up. And so...
Is there a cursor as to where is this picture
Yep, I got
on
you.
the map?
That
Yeah,
is
thank you.
that's where Seabreeze curves.
Which way?
So-
There? Ah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so you can see the fence for the project, the fence for the project boundaries.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Can't promise it'll be the last time.
And
So,
after this, it's probably Hanover Design, but I'm happy to answer whatever I can.
Sure, thank you.
I don't know why I missed it, but they're required to improve the roadway, but they're just not paving it, but there's other improvements.
Right, I suppose they're proposing gravel, but the code does require them to improve, which would require typically asphalt, curb and gutter, sidewalks, drainage. And what they're proposing is effectively to leave it alone, maybe throw some gravel down to stabilize the base or make sure that they meet a stabilized access, but not further propose. Is that a good summary?
Yes, and the drainage down there right now is not great. So one of the things that we would be doing would be grading the right-of-way in order to make it drain better. And in consultation with city staff, it was recommended that since we would be doing improvements to the right-of-way and would be, grading and laying asphalt, gravel or some other kind of non-asphalt in the area, that it would be best to come before DAC to get those variances from the standard cross-section.
Okay, well, got to do the public hearing. So I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We've just got the one waiver to consider. Any discussion on that item? I can see the curb and gutter and maybe the sidewalk requirements seem the easiest to decide. There is definitely a site constraint with the right-of-way width and the ditch there, the established ditch. So to me, that seems reasonable. I do have a question as to whether this would be a case for a payment in lieu for the sidewalk. If it's a required improvement, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be an option. So I would put that out there for discussion. And then I think there's a benefit to paving that little section. I can see rutting in some of these pictures, and when I was out there, the gravel does tend to wash, and that stone dust is going to go right to that waterway. So, just at a glance, my lean is to require the paving for the portion that they're required to pave, but not necessarily the other elements. But I'm certainly willing to discuss.
I can appreciate that opinion too. I've, not from this location specifically, but dust from dirt and gravel roads has been a topic in the past.
Yeah.
I'll add into that, who would be, if it is just, I granted, the road probably is going to have a lot of difficulty as it stands right now. In weather, rain, it's truly not going to be considered an all-weather driving surface. The gravel would improve it, but as Keenan, what you're saying, who's going to maintain it?
Yeah.
When you have major incidents that we're, of course, susceptible to having, then if we got overwash, we've got problems with it, then who maintains it to get it back into its operational condition?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that question would be the city, but to me, it's like you have to kind of weigh, you have some additional asphalt, which, generates a little more runoff, but the problems that we see with the wash from the stone dust into those ditch sections then goes straight to the waterway, and that can cause its own set of problems. So I see a little more benefit to, providing the pavement, but I can certainly appreciate the site constraints that they've got with the other elements of the approval, that being the curb and gutter and the sidewalk requirements. And of course, I think another element of that was the right-of-way width itself. I mean, that's an obvious site constraint. Can't do anything about the right-of-way that's there. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, from a utility standpoint, if we had to dig down and repair that water line, we would rather dig down through gravel than through asphalt, but we yield to whatever the city considers.
Can appreciate that. Yeah, sure.
Just after some of your comments, I did speak with the property owner applicant. A pay in lieu for the sidewalk certainly seems reasonable. As for maintenance, it's city-owned right now and has been in this condition for forever, and really isn't being maintained. If there is a concern about the maintenance of the gravel, if there's some way that we could work with engineering or the right-of-way team to work out some kind of maintenance agreement, the property owner would also be happy to work with staff on some kind of maintenance agreement for the area so that the city didn't have to take that extra burden. So just wanted to point that out to the committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts on? I mean, it's almost like, in my mind, it's one waiver, but you almost got to break it down into parts. How does everyone feel about the sidewalks? I mean, I feel like in that area, there's no other sidewalks. I don't feel like they would contribute much to be installed in that area, and they do have the site constraints with the the ditch. So
Can I ask a question of staff? Pat, can you pull up the land use classification map for CAMA? Do you know, the case summary referenced that it's in both the watershed resource protection and in the conservation land use classifications, and I'm assuming that refers to the entire site, not necessarily the Seabreeze.
That's correct. It was for the entire site. I can try and pull it up and show you where the
I realize it's a bubble and it's.
And what is that? Sorry.
So the reason I was looking, I was just looking at the CAMA plan itself, just looking at what's recommended for watershed resource protection is focusing on minimizing new impervious surface, retrofitting protection measures to improve water quality of runoff from existing impervious surfaces, and to promote low-impact best management practices for development and redevelopment. I didn't know if that would help the discussion in terms of the various elements.
Okay, understood. Well, I will defer to the opinion of the group with respect to the paving. It sounds like we might be on the same page with respect to sidewalks. And I don't know, the curb and gutter isn't listed, but that is a city standard element, so, it's a typical thing. I don't feel like that makes much sense here. So it really kind of, to my mind, it boils down to, do you require the paving or not? And do you require the payment in lieu or not? Yeah, sure.
And so just to be clear, if there was also a payment in lieu as part of the non-pavement, if that's something that, the city wanted to include, I know it's part of the open space. I don't remember if there's something in the code that does for sidewalk and pavement as well, that it would go towards something in the area. But since we're not paving it, if there were connections on Masonboro or trails or something like that, so it could be a split, kind of like you were speaking at the last hearing.
I don't know that I've ever seen a payment for asphalt, but I think the code would allow it. Interesting. Thank you for that. Anybody care to make a motion? All right, here goes. Seeing as how there were some concerns with utilities and the asphalt and the perviousness, I will make a motion that we approve the waiver as presented with the added condition of a payment in lieu for sidewalk for the frontage adjacent to the project. And that is based upon site constraints, proximity to the waterway, and existing conditions.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion on that item? All in favor of approval of the item as presented?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Variance is granted. Now, I guess a point of clarification there, the amount of the payment in lieu, does that need to be discussed, or can that be handled by TRC?
Sorry, that's something that's typically handled at the TRC level, and I think we can work with the engineer to come up with that number.
Okay, yeah, we can get to a more precise length of frontage there, and it would typically be based upon that amount of frontage.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.